have,
straightforward, we don't try to do remote,
yes, yes.
as long as the mics work.
We don't,
When are we being live streamed?
as I understand we are, we should be. We need to check in with them.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Sorry, Heather, you were trying to get ready. Okay, all set? Perfect.
Okay, great. I'd be ashamed to miss that. Good evening. I'll call to order the Select Board meeting of Tuesday, July 23rd, 5 p.m. here in the Parker Room in Rockport. And we have a nice group of members of the public here, as well as the 5 Select Board members and Megan Brackett and John Duke, our town manager. Megan's our finance director. Welcome, everyone. First is comments on non-agenda items. Anyone in the public want to make a comment on a non-agenda item? Next is, anybody? Next is amendments to the agenda. Next, we're under action items, and the first action item, or the only action item tonight, is to appoint members of the Wastewater Exploratory Task Force. And we received 7 applications of members, people wanting to be on this task force with applications, information about them. Many of them were familiar with us and their engagement on this important issue to our community. And I think as a first order, we would just invite anyone who has submitted an application to come up and tell us a little bit about your background and interest on the committee, just to give us a fuller flavor from the applications themselves. Anybody? Richard, you want to start?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Richard Arnaud. I've been a resident of the Mid-Coast since 1985. Raised my family here. Kids went to public schools all the way through, and their best friends are all kids they grew up with here, which is really one of the extraordinary things about being part of this community. Now, I was in favor of the proposal on the ballot that the Select Board supported to create a new state-of-the-art treatment facility in Rockport. But the voters felt that we should be exploring the option of working to the mutual benefit of Camden and Rockport with the Camden community. I think that we have to take that seriously, and I think we have to do everything we can to try to make that happen. And I've done this kind of thing before. I was part of the, is it what I'm saying, or is it?
That's not
I'll sit back a little. I was part of the select committee that worked through a really tough solution to the restoration of Harbor Park and the amphitheater in Camden. That's 20 years ago. And there was a lot of opposition, a lot of strong feelings on both sides. And the library board put together, I think, a very good group of well-intentioned people who were working in good faith toward a solution. I think that's what we need to do here. We need to solve this problem. The future of Rockport and the Mid-Coast really depend on having the capacity to support responsible growth, which means a place for our kids to raise their families and to work. So that's, you know, I have a lot of things going on. I'm on several boards and committees, but I think community comes first after your family, your immediate family. Community is family. So I'd like to be part of this effort if I can, and I think I would do a good job.
Great. Anybody questions for Richard? Great, thank you.
Okay.
Are you a resident of Rockport or Camden?
No, I'm a resident of Camden. My business is in Rockport.
Any
Including
a property?
significant project on Route 90,
Right.
which really depends. It's an effort to create significant workforce housing and also a lot of sewer extension, and that's true for the whole length of Route 90. The TIF district that's been established by public vote what it means is that
Maybe if, since you're going on longer, I thought it might be a quick,
just quickly.
that's all right. It's just people who are watching from home can't hear you.
Voters of Rockport, just a couple of years ago, approved the TIF district along Route 90 that includes our project site. What that means is that any future development, whether it's residential or commercial, would bring tremendous revenue back directly to the community. It won't go to Augusta. It can be reinvested in the town. That's going to make it very attractive for development. It's going to make it attractive for jobs creation. And it makes it possible to create workforce housing, which is to say housing for young people and older people, two-income families that can't afford to build a house here now and say, under $400,000. There's nothing available. Even without that, I think the future growth of the community requires that we have the capacity to manage the waste that's going to be produced. And there's a difference between untrammeled growth and responsible growth. Responsible growth means that this community will feel and look like it does now. And the comprehensive plan in Rockport gives us really great guidelines for that. This intersection of Route 17 and 90, for instance, is a traditional village district. It's an overlay, and it calls for tight development, a pedestrian-friendly community, really great environmental values, and mixed uses, whether residential or commercial. And anything is actually permitted in that district except for noxious industry.
Great, thank you.
Hang on, Richard.
Oh, go ahead.
So clarify for me, you're not a Rockport resident.
I'm a Camden resident.
You own property in Rockport?
Yeah, I have a 200-acre site in West Rockport.
Pay taxes in Rockport?
Pay significant taxes in Rockport, yes.
Okay, all right, thanks. Just a point of clarification, if I could, Denise.
Sure, John.
So, does the committee require residency, or is
No,
just-
we can appoint whoever we want, really.
Okay, right.
Steve?
I wanted to raise a point of
Oh,
clarification.
I thought, are you coming, because you're an applicant?
I want to comment on
Well,
this.
come to the microphone.
Well, come up to the microphone, but we're not going to really comment on other people unless, if you're, this isn't public comment period. This is, if you're an applicant, we'd like to hear from you.
It's a question I have for the board, that's all.
Okay, well, come up to the mic.
The question I have is that Richard Arno is a partner of Richard Remsen, and Richard Remsen is a Rockport resident. I own real estate in Camden, and I have for 40 years, but I'm a Rockport resident, so I know Camden is going to be participating with Rockport, and it would seem to make more sense for Richard Arno to get on the committee of Camden and represent his interest in the Rockport property, just like my interest is in Rockport and not Camden. So I'm obviously a Rockport resident, and I don't know why Richard Remsen is not representing.
Steve, we have 7 applicants. Our business tonight is to hear from each of the applicants. I appreciate those comments,
Right.
but that's out of order. If you want to talk about your application, we'd love to hear from you.
My application is simply, I've been involved in the last 8 months to review the current application in front of the town of Rockport. My interest is purely one of financial review as to whether or not a standalone facility is the appropriate direction to take. My background is in construction and architecture. I'm fully aware of construction costs, and my role is to, in the next 6 months, is to analyze the cost of both facilities, whether it's upgrading the Camden facility or the Rockport facility. So I'm being objective in that I want to look at this thing from a financial standpoint and make a decision in the end as to whether or not whatever solution is the best one from an economic standpoint in the town of Rockport. My role would be to review all the construction costs based on this. I'm not going to get into the politics. I'm not going to get into the areas of which I don't have expertise, and the other people in our committee are well-versed in all those areas. So mine is purely construction costs and realistic end goals as to what this facility is going to cost either Camden's or Rockport's. And I'm open-minded. If in the next 8 months we find that this is a financial problem for Rockport or Camden, I will be willing to be objective in the analysis as to the final cost of this solution.
Okay. Any questions for?
So Steve, besides designing really nice libraries, have you had any experience with anything in the area of wastewater? Water
No,
treatment
no,
or anything like
I
that?
haven't, but it's easy to research construction costs of any type of facilities. We're doing a $10 million renovation for the Owl's Head Transportation Museum. I've never designed a museum, but it's pretty easy to get information on museum renovations and different projects around the country. So wastewater is a standard type of construction, whether it's concrete or masonry, and so you can take the information that exists in other towns and apply it to ours, and a lot of it's just simply based on square footage cost and site cost.
Any other questions for Steve? Thank you, Steve. Taylor?
Yeah, hi. I'm Taylor Allen. I've been in town for over 50 years anyway, and have owned and operated Rockport Marine for a long time. My tenure there is going to end on January 1, when Sam will become the sole owner. I've been involved in community issues for a long time. I was part of the effort that, that got the CSD High School going a quarter of a century ago, and I was involved with the sewer issue when it first came around 35 years ago, and frankly, the dynamic between the two towns seemed pretty familiar as it did back then. And my goal with this particular effort is I hope the two towns can agree to share wastewater facilities and the infrastructure like we've done for a long time. I mean, we have so many issues in common with Camden that I'm hoping this can continue to be one of them. And we share with educational stuff, healthcare, police, solid waste. I mean, to me, it just makes a lot of sense that this could also work. And my own goal is to be able to have this effort work such that a second option can be on an upcoming ballot, so the town voters can choose whether to build a standalone facility or continue to work with Camden. So that's my particular goal with this, and I would look forward to the effort. So.
John?
So Taylor, your experience with the original interlocal agreement, you said the dynamics are very similar. How did you navigate them the last time this came up?
Two groups in each town came together, formed an agreement. The select boards agreed on that, and it went to public vote in both towns, and that's the way it worked. I'm hoping a similar model might work this time around too.
Thanks, great.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Taylor.
Yep, thank you.
Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Temple. I've lived in Rockport for 34 years. I'm the operator of Rockport Marine, and I co-own it with Taylor. Not for long. I first came into this arena of study of wastewater planning around the Harbor Committee, and of which I'm chair, and the first concept of this being a Kramer Park plan, and then followed it through a number of revisions, and to the present day. So I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of the various issues, and some of the political differences, and I'm interested in making this a well-informed decision of the citizens of Rockport. I'm not particularly biased to any technical solution or location. But I want to make sure that we're doing something that's well thought out.
Great. Any questions for Sam? Okay, thank you, Sam.
Great.
Scott?
Am I getting a reputation?
You want a
You don't want
question
Sam
for
to feel left
No,
out.
no, I'm good, I'm good.
Hi, I'm Scott Gazelle. I'm a full-time year-round resident of Rockport. I also serve on the planning board. I've been involved with this wastewater issue, trying to learn as much as I could about it for about the last, I say, 10 months or so. My background is a mixed background in medicine, public health, and finance and public policy. And my career is studying finances and cost-benefit analyses of public health issues, and been doing that for about 25 years. I view this task as an investigative task, really, and which is what I do. And I think I don't have any preconceived notions about the outcome, except that I hope that by the end of the tenure of this committee, we're able to present detailed information to the select board and the residents so that we can make the right decision for the future. I think we have to be cautious not to go into this with a preconceived notion about what is the best outcome, because that will bias our fact finding. But I do think that the dialogue between the two towns is something that has to be part, whether we go our own way or work together, at least establishing dialogue in this process is important. So I think that does have to be a goal. The only other thing I can add is I happen to be a graduate of the Harvard Negotiation Project Leadership and Negotiation Program as well, and that might come in handy, but.
I was just gonna ask you about that. I mean,
Could all
I'm just
use that.
curious, you know, you've been watching this for a while. Do you have any observations about that in terms of how to break the impasse, so to speak?
Well, you know, one of the things I learned in that program, which is sort of a year-long program with fixed periods of time in person, is they say, you know, everyone talks about negotiation, finding common ground, and their baseline thing is you actually have to find uncommon ground, because what you want to find is the things that are valued by one and not the other, and vice versa, because those are your wins, and then you can bring people close together. I think they are the group that has advocated that approach, counter to all the other schools of negotiation, but as an aside.
Yeah,
No,
interesting.
It's good information.
Yeah. Any other questions for Scott? Great. Thanks, Scott. I think that's it for the folks who are here. We have other applicants who are not here, and we've got information both from their applications as well as just being aware of their engagement on these issues. We do have 7 applicants for 5 positions, and you know, we very much appreciate everyone stepping forward and being willing to help Rockport in this endeavor that our voters really want to see and that we want to see happen. So I guess I can't emphasize that enough, that this select board is committed to having this group work towards finding common ground with Camden and a potential solution between the two towns. That, I think we said it at our last meeting, and I just think we probably can't repeat it enough. One thing we did want to make sure we had on the committee from our exploratory task force sort of mission was that we had a balance on the committee of people with different backgrounds, different levels of experience, and views on these issues in Rockport. And it seems like among the applicants, we really do have that. If anybody else wants to comment, or we can.
No, I'll just say, as I said last meeting, I'm very excited for this committee, this task force. I think there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of brain power, there's been a lot of work that's put into this already, and I think there are no bad answers, there are no wrong suggestions, and at the end, I think coming back and having some great solutions for the voters to reconsider is the only thing that we can ask at this point, and I'm excited to have this group kick off.
John?
So, one thing that's missing in the group of applicants we have is an engineer. And so do we want to just talk a little bit about how that's going to work? Because at some point, they're going to need some advisors and that sort of thing. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we do have, I know there was a view among our, were you raising your hand, Taylor, or you're just, okay. Well, my view on that, I'll just say that, just hearing engineers, seeing two engineers who worked on the, helping us on the sewage treatment plant, and I understand that, the task force and some public statements have been made that they didn't think anybody who had been on the original task force should be part of this new task force. And that's fine, and nobody's applying from that task force. But there's some pretty high-powered engineering capabilities from that task force that could be brought in if it, as sort of on a consulting basis. So that's what occurs to me is.
Yeah, I just want to, kind of cue that up.
Yeah.
There are resources right and left, and the wastewater treatment manager, I think is his title, at Dave St.
Laurent, yeah.
And Terry Pinto in Rockland, who handles 30% of the wastewater. I mean, we should be thinking about.
Yeah, and I guess I would look to this task force to sort of, we can provide whatever assistance we can, but to find the resources they need to move forward.
Yeah, and obviously Woodard and Curran should be somewhere in the,
It can't be done without them, I think,
Yeah,
because
so-
our system is.
So even though they're not on the committee,
Right,
the
and that's an
expectation
important
is-
point too, is just because you're not on the committee, even for folks who have applied to be on the committee, and if they are not on the committee, these will be public meetings. Anyone can attend these meetings, and I would encourage people who have an interest and a passion on this particular subject to do so. It's not, we need to, for structural reasons and the way our policy works, we've decided that 5 is a workable number. But if other people want to attend meetings and provide input, that is how our committees always work.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Scott.
Which is, my hope would be there would be no limit on the people or the resources that this committee could consult if needed, and I just wanted to make sure that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's up to the committee on who they want to engage. We will not.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think my take on this is that, the committee decides who their resources are, and if they're not sure, they can certainly ask for resources. But I think, my understanding is, once the committee is chosen, the task force is chosen, it's in your lap to gather the information that you need from whatever sources you can, and ask for assistance as needed.
If I
agree with
just could add in terms of staff, right, because that's the other part of this, and, certainly the prior effort was staff involved, whether there was a task force involved as well. I look at this as, one, the voters have spoken loud and clear what they want. Our job, as the board wants, is to try to support this effort best we can. Now, what exactly, or how exactly that turns out, I'm not entirely sure exactly, but certainly space and the types of obvious things that are, to me are obvious in terms of space and being able to send out agendas and post on the website and things like that are just sort of the rather the usual run of course for our committees. This group is part and parcel with all of that. In terms of, there are some technical aspects that if we dial this up there is a limitation, right? Certainly we couldn't find maybe the best wastewater engineer in the entire world, perhaps. That might be out of our price range to start, but there are certainly, I think if the need is demonstrated, it's our job to try to figure out how do we do that, and if need be, come back to the board to perhaps see if there's alternative avenues or see how far staff can go to support those needs. But I look at this is I think everyone on the board said it. This is something that we're the support from the staff and the board is 100%, you know, and whatever is needed, let's just have to figure out how to, in the course of a committee, figure out what they need and organizing those things through 5 voices into one. But that happens with every committee we have, so nothing's different.
And Frank, I mean, the committee or the task force would eventually have a chair pretty early on, and that could be the one would likely be the one voice. Sam had his hand up first.
So, remembering on the Harbor Committee that we're a committee of 5 with a quorum of 3 and 2 associate, I think they're called associate members. Is that a model that's, I mean, here tonight we have 2 people missing of the applicant pool. And they may feel like they said their bit at the last one of these, but that having associates can help make quorum, you know, and may lead to an expedited process, which I think the board is seeking.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you. Mr. John and I did not discuss this before this meeting. First, my name is Bob Colmar. I'm a resident here in town. First, thank you for hosting this special meeting. I am a civil engineer, and I did participate in the wastewater task force. So I took the beating. There's only 3 times that people think about wastewater: when you flush the toilet, when you get the bill, and when there's a need for a service, like either modifying the existing infrastructure or having new infrastructure. It's the only time we think about it. When one of the 3 doesn't work, we're to blame, the civil engineers. So I was pleased to participate in the wastewater task force, and that we did accomplish our mission, which was trying to find, are there alternatives? And there are, and I think there's more. I think this new advisory group can find that. Wastewater, it's critical to our community to address it one way or the other. I would like to express appreciation to the volunteers who are going to serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee. It's not easy. It's not going to be pleasant to discuss alternatives, but alternatives to Rockport: designing, engineering, constructing, managing, operating, and maintaining its own facility. So we have to come up with something that's an equal. It's not an easy task, and it's not inexpensive, no matter what we do. To the best of my knowledge, it's been about 855 days since Camden provided a letter to Rockport saying that we no longer want you to be a tenant in our facility as our landlord. As a landlord, they told us that. Hopefully, and I'm confident that our newly appointed advisory group will unlock this logjam in very short order. I think the parties will be serious about sitting down and discussing this, and I think they can reach, I'll call it common ground or uncommon ground or whatever, in a short period of time. It won't take us long. We need to find out, do you want us to be a valued tenant or not? Number one. If yes, we want you to be a valued tenant, these negotiations won't take long, and it won't be extensive. But I would like to ask the advisory committee, there are several key pieces of information that you had asked about that would be beneficial for Rockport to have at the earliest point in these discussions. One is a copy of Camden's entire wastewater condition assessment report.
Bob, maybe what I'm wondering whether when the task force gets formed and has their first meeting, you could present that information to
Happy
them,
to.
or you could submit it to us and we can submit it to the task force. What do you think is the right? Because I'm afraid here we'll hear it, but nobody's taking notes or gonna,
Okay.
if we want to have that accomplished.
Yeah, there's some important elements that should happen quickly, right up front. And then we'll know, which way this is going to go.
Yeah, and I think that's important, valuable
I couldn't
information.
participate because I don't have the patience that the rest of our group has.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I'm just a fact-finding engineer that wants to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And I'm known as the impatient engineer.
Yeah,
So
and it's great to have, I mean, I think you're sort of pointing out, there's some expertise we already have of what could be for the task force, some of the first
Happy
documents that they
to
need to
hold these
obtain.
comments and
Well, can you
serve as a resource.
boil it down to a few key points? 'Cause I'd be curious to hear them, just to,
Okay,
since you're right here and he's
Yep,
got it all
that's-
mapped
I
out.
think there's two that are critical.
Okay.
One is a copy of Camden's entire wastewater condition assessment report. Every infrastructure, whether it's a school or the public works, every piece of infrastructure gets a condition assessment report every year. Those are updated annually. It'd be excellent to have that on hand quickly. It's public because it's produced with public funds. Also is a copy of Camden's wastewater strategic plan, which will detail the future needs and financial requirements of the system. And at some point, I think you had brought up the third, is to have our wastewater consultant also be available to participate with Camden's wastewater consultant, so that all the questions are answered. Once this information is gathered, then this can be presented to the select board and staff.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Bob.
you. Wish them best of luck and
Yep.
Godspeed in the near future.
Speed.
Thank you.
Well, are we ready to,
Well,
go ahead, John.
just wondering if anybody had any questions about some of the applicants that aren't here, because some of us could speak to them if need be, not in any other way other than, verify what they put in their application or something, I don't know.
At least to acknowledge
So-
the
okay.
names of who they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right,
so we have Sally Cook and Des Fitzgerald are two of the 7 applicants who are not here tonight, but did fill out applications and are well-known to all of
Sally
us.
last time, right?
Yeah, Sally was
Sally
here,
was
she
with us.
talked to us last time,
Yeah.
so I'm sure she assumed that was all that was needed.
Well, I think we indicated speak then in case they couldn't make the next meeting.
Yeah, so she knew she would not be available tonight. And Des Fitzgerald submitted an application and, yeah, so. Any other thoughts or discussions before we move to a motion?
Well, I don't know if it's fair to have us sort of advocate for one or more of the people who have applied. Is that, I mean, since Des isn't here, I just know, to me, he feels like a very strong applicant.
Yeah, I would feel,
And I just want to make sure I emphasize that, if everybody take a good look at his application.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I thought it was
It's
a
all- it's
good
all-
application, and he's been involved with this group, involved with the issue, so I think that,
Not to dismiss them because they're not here.
Yeah.
right,
Right, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
no, I think that's right, and,
Yeah, I mean, and we've had a chance to review all of the applications and an opportunity, if we had questions, to ask those, even if someone's not here tonight. So,
yeah, so,
So do we make a motion
yeah,
based
I
on?
think start with the motion,
I
and we
mean,
can,
I'm-
and we can
I'm-
have a discussion
Okay,
after
I'm
the
happy to
motion.
start with a motion. So based on my review of the applications, and thanks for those that are here tonight, which is anything officially, I move to appoint Sally Cook, Scott Gazelle, Taylor Allen, Des Fitzgerald, and Richard Arno.
Is there a second?
Wait, Sally Scott Taylor.
Sally?
Des.
Sally, Scott, Taylor, Des, and Richard.
Okay, just for discuss, so we can move,
Okay.
so we get a second,
Second.
okay?
So I liked Sam's thought about, he called it associates, but it's sort of alternates. Because it's going to be a group working over the course of a year, and, if somebody can't make a meeting or having some other people involved, do we want to consider that for some of the people that aren't?
Yeah, and that's a point. I guess I was thinking that typically the point of alternates is to sort of have a seed bed for the committee for longstanding committees, rather
Right.
than a task force where you sort of get in, do the work, get out. And so so I'd like to sort of have the 5 people who are really in the committee and are the voice of, but This is for the select board to discuss. Thanks, Steve.
Can I ask a question, though? So
Yeah.
if we are in a situation where we appoint five, back to John's point, and someone can't be there or decides they don't want to be part of this committee 6 weeks into it, what happens then? If we had an alternate,
Yeah,
that person would just step in, right?
Right.
If we don't have an alternate,
we go back to
we
the
have to
applicants.
come back to
and-
the applicants and go through a process
Yeah,
again.
That's a good point. If there is a
Yeah.
vacancy, do we want to revisit this, or do we want to just have some people on
have some
deck?
people who we
Right.
can move into. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if it's,
I don't know if this is out of order. I'm just wondering,
Come to the microphone.
yeah.
is there a statutory reason why it has to be 5 people, or is?
That's how we set it up.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's the answer to
just
my
to try
question.
to keep it manageable.
Just because I think there are 7 really qualified
Candidates.
Yeah,
candidates who are committed, so
yeah.
there should be some way for them all to be able to participate.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. Taylor?
Yeah, thanks. So I know we've got a deadline of having a report to you all by next spring sometime.
March,
In time for the June ballot. There's a good likelihood, or at least I hope, the work of this committee lasts for much longer than that, because I'm hopeful that not only can we reach an agreement with Camden, but also there's a possibility that Rockland might be able to join a 3-town kind of municipal utility district. So the likelihood that work for this committee is gonna go beyond, I think, is high.
Yeah.
So having some alternate members, I think, also works to everybody's benefit in that regard as well.
Yeah.
So,
Good point.
while we're at the microphone, Taylor, so do you feel like 5 is a functional level of
I do.
committee
Yeah.
members?
I mean, again, I think it's your decision, but I think, frankly, I think any number can work.
Well, ideally, it should be an odd number.
Well,
Right.
I would agree with that.
So either do
Because we are
5
an
or
odd
7.
group.
Right, right.
But my concern would be to get the group gets too big, and then, because we do expect engineers will be tapped to
Yeah,
come
sure.
in, and, so we're hoping it's more of a dynamic
Yeah.
group.
I would agree with
As opposed to just 5 people in a room by themselves talking all the time.
Agreed.
So-
Yeah. No, we're gonna need expertise in various fields, for sure.
Great.
Okay.
Michael?
And I agree with keeping it to 5, and I do think the idea of 2 alternates is smart. To even decide that now and just say they'll be appointed, the other 2.
Yeah.
Based on conversations I've had with Sally, I kind of understand that maybe she would prefer to be an alternate than one of the keys. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but as of.
She hasn't
as of-
communicated that
Right,
to
right.
anyone.
And as of
Yeah.
a few days ago, that been the indication.
Well,
that
then I think if that's the situation, we would be best to have 5 and 2 alternates.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I don't want us to be in a position where you start your discussion, someone makes a decision
Right.
that they don't want to do it or can't do it for whatever reason, and then we've got to wait for another select board meeting to
Right.
appoint someone else when we
Yeah.
have 7 people that have stepped up to the plate for a very, very difficult task. And if they're willing to do it, I would just
Okay.
soon have.
So we've got a motion
we
in
could-
front of us.
Yeah, so.
So my question would be, should we ask the 2 that are not in the motion if they're interested in being alternates?
That's a good way to.
Can I go sit down, or?
Yes, yes, we're off the hot seat
We didn't,
here.
no, I'm not going to say it.
So,
So we have, let's see, so Sam and Steve.
lots of S names here.
Yeah.
So would you be interested in serving as alternates?
Steve?
I would like to withdraw my name as an applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so that's,
Okay.
Sam, would you want to be an alternate?
I would be an alternate.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, is that something that a board would decide, or is that something that committee would decide?
That's what the board will decide. I mean, I would imagine we'll amend the motion to include you as an alternate.
And with the expectation that if there is a vacancy, that Sam
That Sam
then
would move
become-
into
Sam would
that.
become-
over my skis, but if Sally tomorrow says, oh yeah, I'd really rather not, I'd rather be the alternate,
Yeah.
I just want to have that provision.
So that
kind
can
of
only
covered
happen
now.
once then, because that can only happen once.
Yeah, we only have one.
Right, we only have one spot here. So do I need
Yeah, they haven't
to,
been beating down the doors to sign up for this committee.
do I need
for
to
sure.
amend the motion? Okay.
I think-
So I will amend the motion to appoint Sally Cook, Scott Gazelle, Taylor Allen, Des Fitzgerald, Richard Arno, with an alternate Sam Temple.
And a second.
Okay?
Any discussion, any more discussion?
Any more?
All right. All those in favor? Great. Thank you,
you very
everyone,
much.
for coming and being willing to do this work. John, so what's the next for these folks? I guess Diane will reach out to them and
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I assume we'll want a meeting scheduled fairly quickly, so, I think probably the easiest thing to do would be have like a doodle poll or something and set out to everybody. I don't know if you already have times that are set, but we could sort of set up some times, and we still need to assign a staff, someone who's staff who has keys and can get you in spaces and so forth. So we need to work through that, but, try to get something scheduled ASAP, because I know there's a lot of
Time's
interest.
wasted, yeah.
Right, and I don't want to let that be any barrier. So Diane will likely be out tomorrow, but I will ask that she send something out to the 7 of you, or six of you to at least get everybody on the same path and get a time and start meeting. And organize yourselves, elect a chair, vice chair, and so forth. Beautiful.
Great,
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Okay.
Where will they be meeting?
what's that, Michael?
Will they be meeting on town facility?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they can, yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't have to,
They could
but they're,
meet where they
make,
want,
yeah,
but-
they're welcome to meet wherever they want, but we're offering up town facilities to facilitate what you're.
It doesn't need, it needs to be a public meeting.
Yes.
Right,
So-
agendas, minutes, right, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly what I was
Does it
gonna
have
say.
to be broadcast?
No,
On the Owl? Okay.
no, most of our committee meetings aren't. Okay, and then I think the other issue for us to decide is a liaison for the committee, a select board liaison, and
I'll put my hat in the ring.
Michael, you'd like to do that? I think that'd be,
Put my hat in the ring.
and John would like to do that, and I think both of you have been engaged, and we definitely have co-liaisons when that's,
And I'm
when
happy
there's
to
that
have you
interest.
put your
Yeah.
hat in the ring. So I'm happy to support co-liaisons for this group. I think that.
Yeah, okay,
So we
and we
can-
don't need a vote on that, but just,
Okay,
that's great,
Perfect.
I'm good with that.
okay.
Teamwork.
Be nice to each
Teamwork,
other over
that's
there.
it.
Sure, it's
Teamwork
pretty
makes the
legal.
dream work.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, I think that's it for that agenda item.
Do we need to have a staff liaison? Is that-
Yeah, there'll be, John will work on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've floated the concept to a number of staff, and I haven't been able to wrap my,
They're not
as
getting
much
real
fun
excited.
as it is to talk about wastewater.
Right. You can't. They're running towards you to.
last-
So if there's anyone out there has some tips on how we can help lure them in, let me know.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go, every
Scott,
meeting.
That works.
I'm gonna call on you on that one. Thank you.
Scott, we're gonna use your.
Even better.
Scott, we're gonna use your Harvard leadership and negotiation skills for that. So
Yeah,
Thanks, thank you
Great.
very much.
thanks, everyone.
great. Thank you.
Let's see, next on the agenda, really, we have something called discussion items, but we don't have any discussion items
Okay.
tonight.
Well, that was could be an easy topic.
And next is wastewater commissioners. So do we exit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
a motion to-
that's-
I guess it's all
I'm
here.
making a motion to exit the select board meeting and enter into wastewater commissioners meeting.
Okay,
Second.
second. Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, so, John,
Well,
take it away.
here we are.
Call the board, do you have to call the
Oh,
wastewater commissioners?
Oh, we do have to, now that we're in the
Yes,
meeting, do
now
I
you
call
have
it to
to
order? I call the
call it to
wastewater
order,
commissioners
yes.
meeting to order.
Very
And
call.
Yes.
Our first order of business is review of the fiscal year '25 wastewater budget.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience in considering this budget. Certainly this came to you under less than ideal circumstances, but I think by the time we get to the end of the conversation we have here, I think a lot of the issues and a lot of the mystery of sorts of what's in this budget and where it's going will be abundantly clear for the five of you. For the 3,700 others out there, maybe not. But because you all have been living in this world a little bit more than most, these are things I think that will come to light, and certainly for Kim and Michael, who this is their second time around, it's a little bit easier. Poor John has got, this is first time around on this horse, but anyway, we'll get there. This has been very much this budget's timing is based upon the fact that it follows the work that's done in Camden and Rockland, right? So their rates obviously set the tone. They're the communities that that treat our waste, and once they have done their work to figure out what their budgets are, then Megan and Dave is also part of that as representing Woodward and Curran and what their, the labor side of this equation. We really have to wait a great deal for everyone else to do their work, and then we can pick up the banner. So it's a very much, this isn't like the rest of our municipal budget where we're somewhat operating on our own time. Everyone else has to do their homework first, and then we get to start. So partly that's why the timing of this is always so odd. Traditionally, this was done at the end of June for the, sort of the last, or I guess the first meeting of the new select board would consider the wastewater budget. That's sort of been a traditional thing in Rockport. But the times have changed, things have changed, and this is apparently one more. The other issue, though, is that the setting of our rate then, once Camden, Rockland, Woodward and Curran, five of you set your budget and thus the user rate that we're applying to Rockport's users, we have to get that number out to Maine Water within how many days? A week?
By the end of the month.
Yeah. So we got, about a week to get that number to our friends at Maine Water, and then they'll bill.
Because that will be the first bill of the fiscal year.
Exactly. So there's a bit of a time crunch here that is really outside of anyone's wishes and hopes in terms of how this all operates. But it's largely a function of, in a weird way, it's a function of how our relationships and our place and lacking really a better standard of how we operate regionally and internally. It's like it's another canary in the coal mine of this is why it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this for the five of you. It shouldn't be like this for staff to put this together. It shouldn't be like this to Dave, who's waiting for a signed contract to let his staff to know what they can do. There's just it's imperfect on a number of levels. And yet we have a system that works really well, that is well taken care of. We have excellent employees who work through Woodward and Curran, but on the town of Rockport's behalf to upkeep and maintain what we have. The downside is we have a tremendously high rate, and we have a debt service load that is rising, but this is in the face of headwinds, and all of you know what those headwinds are. I'm not going to belabor them tonight, but coming into this budget, I had a great anticipation that this rate was going to be considerably higher than what we have here. I was
actually relieved when I
Yes.
saw it.
Yes.
You know what? I was relieved to see the number that it was,
Not as high as you
Yeah.
anticipated.
So, I mean, you look at the rate increases that we see from Rockland and from Camden, because usually those impacts are not, they're not sort of proportional, I expected to see, you know, an 8% here from Camden means a 15% in Rockport. We didn't see that, but largely that was because last year we had built in extra funds in our wastewater budget to deal with underpayment in prior years. So we didn't see as big of a shift as I thought we may have in this budget. So I guess thankfully there was.
That built-in part is not part of this.
Yeah, right, not to the same degree as it was last year. So that's a great thing. It's still at the end results in a higher rate as the budget's presented. But at the very least, we aren't seeing a, 20, 30, 35% increase, which was my fear going into the budget
So the
process.
rate is going up from $20 to $21.25, so.
Yeah, so $1.25 increase, and I'm gonna bring up the letter here.
So it's a 3.87%
3.87?
Less than, which there aren't many things that are going up less than 4% at this point in time.
Unfortunately.
And I think that's particularly, I guess, this is not making any structural changes to how we operate our wastewater system or anything. This is just working with the money we have and the system we have and the new rates we have. So I think that's good. I think we can discuss, not necessarily in detail tonight, potential future structural changes within our own system, independent of the fact that we're sort of beholden to our neighbors for wastewater treatment and their wastewater treatment rates. But to sort of consider how we can sort of gain more efficiencies in our system.
And to give a sense, so if you look at page 23, it provides a little bit, some historical context. I'm gonna stop talking soon because I've talked too much and I'm trying to do better at that in the new fiscal year. So I'm gonna hand it over to Megan a little bit here. But on page 23 of this, because I think the context is important, that there's a chart we have in gray, who's like 2/3 of the way down the page, which cites a rate from July 7th of 2017 of 1105. And we're now 7 years later, 7 years later, we're not double, but darn near.
Pretty close.
Okay.
Close enough.
You're looking at, your debt for one EU has gone from $49 to $72.50. Basically a 50% increase. So, this is information that would be really helpful for that group that was just appointed, I think, to recognize these are the pressures, right?
Yep.
I don't want to minimize the earlier conversations that were had this spring, but that's why those conversations were happening. It's because these pressures, seeing a homeowner's rate double, to see debt service increase by 50% nearly, those impacts are can be managed, but we need a different system and a different makeup to do that. If it's a relationship with Camden, Rockland, Warren, Vinyl Haven, I don't care who it is, but somehow something has to stem that tide. And I think that's really why all of this began, right? So I want to talk about the big picture before we talk about the small picture, because the big picture, that big picture is why we've been where we've been. And how do we then pull back from that and say, what are the little things we can do in this yearly budget to take, with 2 full-time employees, and some capital needs that we'll talk about in a little bit here. What do we do in that? And then paying a great sum to our neighbors, north and south. How much can we do outside of that to really change? And so there's a lot that's baked into this budget that there's not a whole lot you can do with. Capital is capital, and you can choose not to and choose to do. But it's the reason why a lot of these wastewater budgets end up the way they do is there's a fear of, oh my gosh, the wastewater budget, we're gonna go dig through this budget like it's the municipal budget process. so much of it is, we've got pipes, and there's not much we can do with it other than try to make it the best we can for what we can afford.
And we have 23 pump stations, which is just a function of our topography, and, Camden by comparison has 7 pump stations, so it's a huge difference in why and we have many fewer users. So when we look at Camden's rate of, $10, almost $11 all in, we do have a very expensive system to operate. I'm curious, just because I hadn't really focused on the really dramatically increasing rate, Megan, I see that we had, through June of 2019, we were at around $12, and then we're sort of leaping. And I know that some of it later on has to do with underpayment, making good on all of that, but why did it increase so much?
Haven't heard back from Rockland yet, but I started looking at the rates that we have been charged by Camden and Rockland over the last 10 years to see how that affects how our rate is changing. Rockland unfortunately archives a lot of that information, so it wasn't readily available to her, but she's working on getting that to me. Camden's numbers I was able to pull off their website from the budgets that they had posted on their website. So since fiscal year ending 2014 to fiscal year ending 2025, Camden's rate has increased by 65%. So in fiscal year ending 2014, their published rate was $3.85 per 100 cubic feet. And their proposed rate for this year is $10.88.
So,
And-
Megan, can I jump in
Sure.
just on that? So it's increased 65% since when?
2014.
2014, and did the expiration of the interlocal agreement, did anything jump when that expired?
No, it started jumping before that. So their first subsistent increase was starting fiscal year ending 2020, and it's gone up almost consistently $1 or around $1 every year.
And there must have been a jump at the point at which they decided they were gonna put capital costs into their rate rather than to
And
their
they
taxpayers.
started building that into a reserve type fund, so they were slowly adding that year over year. So we've been paying a portion of that within the rate. So if you look at this chart, I don't know if all of you can see it, but they went from a rate of 385 to a rate of 1088. There is some confusion. I did call them. They're working on getting this information for me. With their rates between 2014 and 2016, some of their published budgets contradicted each other on what the rate was, but not by a lot. Like the 15 rate, one place said 440, another place said 404. So it's not a significant change, but know that those numbers could change depending on what they're able to pull up for me. And then, like I said, Rockland is working on getting me that same information as well.
So for us, when we went from $13.50 to $18.10, we went up $5, which was about 27%. And that was from July 19, the July 19 to the July 20.
So Camden's rate saw an 8% increase that year.
But ours went up way more than that one.
Correct. So my guess is Rockland's went up as well, but I can't say that for sure until I do the same exercise for
And it might have been
Rockland's
our own
numbers.
costs, right?
Yeah, our own
'Cause-
costs probably went up,
'cause
staffing
As I
charges,
recall, there was something on
benefits.
I&I that we weren't
Yes.
always billing
Yes.
the users for the I&I
Correct.
costs.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
And we're shifting that onto the users, which,
That was that same year,
Yeah.
Yes.
and that,
We
the
did that
phone
big
calls
study.
That
and-
big
Yep.
increase, yeah.
yep.
yeah, that timing lines up
Yeah.
well. And of course, then it also lines up to the next 2 years, 15 and 1550, which were impacted by the fact that the town decided, well,
Right.
we need to renegotiate their local agreement and so forth and so on, and so
Right.
it was
Those are
artificially lower,
low.
Right.
but not reflective either of the normal growth of Camden's wastewater increases, nor reflective of the fact that anything had changed from a connection, a legal connection, but, binding the communities. It was, somewhat of a, like I said, an artificially low period.
You would
So-
think, since we did address our I&I problem, that we might see some relief, that there should be some help on the rate in that.
Except in that same time period that we found those II issues, we had a lot of new connections too. So they kind of, I won't say they like one for one washed each other out, but we did have a lot of new connections.
But
at
that should
time.
help us, right? That should help reduce the rate?
The usage, correct, but like your operating costs have continued to increase over that time too,
Because you've
while
had
we've added.
Because you're
Right.
adding new people. Did that increase the Woodard and Kern?
Uh,
I'm sort of curious how that contract is, percentage-wise, has
Randy,
changed.
that might have been the year that we added the second person for wastewater.
So we doubled
I don't
the
know for sure,
personnel.
but it was before you got here, right? So that would make sense.
So we went from 1 to 2, so we
Correct.
doubled our personnel costs.
One thing, yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, if I could jump in just briefly, John, what was the year that we should kind of say everything got jazzed because we were catching up payments and we were underpaying? I mean, what year should we basically kind of ignore out of this?
I would, so it says on here, so the first one that says July 22, which should be July 21.
Yeah,
So that year, the first 15, and then the second 15, which actually was July of 22.
right. So-
That's 15 and 1550. Both of those years artificially low. And you can somewhat see the trend line, a steady, not a, if you sort of ignore that, but you ignore those two plot points, but you look at the next two.
20 and then 21.
It kind of follows the
Oh,
same
evens
trend.
out, yeah.
It's not, rocketing to the sun,
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
We did make one structural change in this budget in the terms of going from essentially 2 full-time employees to 1.5 full-time employees for wastewater. One of the employees that works for wastewater will be helping Public Works because Public Works is severely understaffed. So we're gonna use some money, some wage money that we budgeted for Public Works, offset the wastewater budget by that, and that person will work a couple days a week with the Public Works crew.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
So you take your one. you
Yeah,
can't-
rather than going from 1 to 2,
Right. You can't, it's like cutting the baby in half, right?
Right,
You
yeah.
don't do that, right? So you wanna make sure, but if you can split it days of the week and the beautiful thing is, obviously, the staff works literally across the parking lot from each other, so to cross over, as long as we can make clear who's responsible for what, and if emergencies break, then call it, break the Woodard and Current phone, and then, you set them free, but I'd like to move back in the mode of where there's a lot more collaboration and a lot more overlap between those two sides of things, but,
there's one category of this budget that we really can't do anything about now because it's the administration portion, because that's already baked in from our town budget, because we allocated various staff members in the town office. Some of their time is allocated to the wastewater budget. And I guess I wonder, when we talk about the timing of the wastewater budget, I know we don't have the Rockland and Camden rates, but I do think this next budget year, we need to have that discussion when we can make a difference on it and really make sure we're being fair to our sewer users in terms of how we allocate town staff. And maybe get some of the budget put together at that point, but still have sort of places you're gonna have to fill in once we get the Woodard and Kern information and get the Camden and Rockland rates. Because we're sort of here, and this is what we gotta do, 'cause
Right.
that's the
And I
only way
think
to
by then
balance.
too, you'll have a pretty good idea of what staff requirements are gonna be for the task force that you just created. I think that could put a higher burden maybe through that next year on some individuals at the town office. So I think that it's important to look at maybe even having those affected people track how much time they're actually spending
Yeah,
on
so we really
wastewater
get an
during that
idea.
time
Yeah.
period.
That's a great.
And I would say as the one who probably did most of the tweaking in terms of those percentages, my anticipation in this budget was that there'd be an approved wastewater treatment plant, that there'd be a lot of time spent on trying to track construction and billing and design, and that's not gonna happen, right? There's definitely gonna be work to be done, and until there's a long-term solution, there's a lot of work that staff is going to be putting in on the wastewater side of things.
But you
But
might
not-
have baked in more.
Yeah, I would not have maybe been quite as heavy on the thumb of the scale on that in this case. But I would say, and I mean, we've had this conversation and about this. The way that wastewater has grown as a town, as a pseudo town department, but an actual town department, there's been a natural growth of that over time. And part of it, I think, has been we've relied a lot on Woodward and Curran to save our bacon. As a bit of a history lesson on this, 30 years ago, when Rockport built this system, we didn't know what we were doing. We had a lot of problems. And we had to call Woodward and Curran, and they saved us. They kept this project and this success rolling when it was beyond the town's control to do so. And so we have Andy Field, who's been working for Woodward and Curran, but working really in the town of Rockport. I hope you're okay with that, Dave, you saying that. Andy's been here for decades, and so he knows the system, he knows it backwards and forwards. But there's a lot of overlap when you look through that administration section of every department has a little piece of this. And so as the system has grown in part, but as it has grown, become perhaps even more complex, as the issues become more complex. I mean, there are 3 people in the planning and community development office who are touching that. I'm working on this. If I'm not talking about wastewater every day, I don't know what's going on. Right, when we had those bills go up to $18 there in the spring of 20.
How many calls did
Yeah,
Megan
Megan
get?
was like.
Right. So and we outsource our billing. So there's a part where, the natural outgrowth is, well, we can't do this on our own, right? We can't do this on our own.
30 years ago.
We thank goodness we have Woodward and Curran to make sure everything's flowing where it should and running. But even our administration of it is it doesn't have the efficiency it probably should. So those are the aspects. Forget about actually what Andy and Randy are doing on a daily basis. There's a lot of overlap here, and so some of that efficiency is also cooked into this cake that you're seeing here. And it, again, the thought was we were moving towards one model, and maybe we're not moving towards that model, but this needs to be more efficient in addition to where the wastewater is going and who we're paying to treat it.
Yeah, maybe that's because this budget, there's so much in here that we can't do much about at this point, but maybe that could be the topic of a workshop or a select board meeting where we really look structurally at how we're running the wastewater system, have you sort of, John, present to us some of what you're seeing on your end and how we could make it more efficient and cost-effective for our users.
Yeah, it needs to be. This is 10% of our budget. 10% of our expenditures is built, and it's more than just it's billing, it's software, and it's legal. I mean, it is a catch-all,
Yeah.
but I think there's a better way. So, anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments.
Yeah.
John?
So, this question probably for Megan. We've got the fiscal year '24 numbers, the budget number, the year-to-date, but
Can you
it seems
say
like
what page you're on? Are you on this one that's up here?
Well, it's kind of throughout.
Okay.
It seems inconsistent that sometimes we have, our fiscal year is ended, but it's clear we don't have all the expenses in yet. And
The expenses are there. For the most part, there are some June bills that we haven't gotten yet. The revenues are not there because when we did the fiscal year end closeout, created the new year. When I went back to post the June revenues, they did not post correctly in our accounting software. And I have been waiting since then for them to fix that, and they haven't fixed it yet. So I didn't want to post revenues that weren't accurate through the year end, so I left them out.
Okay, because it's a little hard when you look at the budget for next year if we don't really quite know where we landed for this year. And,
Well, wait till you get to the budget, because we're doing the budget, we start the budget in March, and the fiscal year doesn't end till June 30, so you're trying to guess. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, John, I'm just saying for wastewater, it's all much more closely aligned. But for some of these issues Megan raised, usually we do have.
So can we ask questions about some of the detail here?
Sure.
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah, we have Megan, and if it's a Woodard and Kern, and,
Well, I've got a couple pages of questions
Sure.
on this one, so hold on. So first, generally, the contingency line.
and if you could direct us to a page you're on. when you
Well,
have-
it's on a number of pages, but we just, let's go to contingency, let's go to page 28 of 46. We have a contingency line 4450, a couple of years ago it was 50, then it was 100,000, then this past year it's 50, and it seems like we haven't used any of it this year.
So we haven't used any of it here, but some of this has to be used to offset the amount that we paid Camden, because we paid Camden 600 and something $1,000, and we only budgeted 400 and something thousand.
So really, that 50,000 is getting
is
used.
spent, it's just not spent in that line. So we budgeted this year to pay Camden $436,000. We paid Camden $645,000. So we have to find money in other places in the budget and just not spend it and reallocate it. So, and that contingency money was really put there to help us with the Camden stuff, with the litigation process. That was the point of it.
Would that be
so-
a not, you can't do it by just showing it as spent?
Well, no, because the expenditure is showing under the Camden treatment, so then I'd be allocating that expenditure twice.
So that's a good segue. So the rate that we've built into this budget came from Camden, and we put it in here at 100% for next year.
Correct.
So it's none of this 15%.
We did 100% of their posted rate, plus we added, depending on how negotiations go with the board, I added in the 15% that we haven't paid for the fiscal year. So if you decide that as a board that you're gonna pay that 15% we didn't pay last year, you have the money to pay it.
You're already on to my next question. You checked that one right off. So, good. That's what I wanted to hear. So at this point, we basically have it budgeted to square everything with Camden if
Correct.
we wanted to.
Correct.
Okay, great.
And if you don't do that, that money doesn't go into a dark hole. You could use the funds that you collect this year with the thought that you may or may not pay that, and you could offset next year's budget with the excess that you collect this year. So say you decide as a board that you're not gonna pay that 15% reduction that they agreed to last year, you can take that extra money and offset next year's budget with it.
Okay. So my next question is also sort of in that contingency neck of the woods. The question came up when we were talking about the committee, the task force, and they may need some funding along the way. Is this a place we could look to get
Correct.
funding for that?
And that's, when we talked about it, that's what we talked about, that money being there for, is if that committee or you decided to hire an expert or something, that you'd have the money to do that.
So right now, 25,000 is what we're budgeting for contingency. How do I say this? Is that assuming everything is squared up with Camden?
Correct. The entire amount to pay Camden is shown in that Camden treatment number in the operations budget. So, if you look on page 32, the Camden treatment number is 477,000 and some change. That number is our average usage over the last year multiplied by their 1088, plus we added, we took the increased flows since the hotel opened and added an amount to those averages because the hotel's only been open 6 months. So we added a little bit more usage by that and then added the 15%
So the-
reduction that we didn't pay this year.
So the contingency is truly a
Correct.
contingency
Yep.
at 25,000. Do we feel that's enough for, I mean, if, say, the committee needs, I mean, could they use 100% of that? And are we gonna need a contingency for anything else that you can foresee? You know, can you predict the future?
Well, you have $15,000 in legal fees. So presuming you don't need more than that to come to a settled agreement with Camden, then I personally can't foresee anything that you would need that contingency money for other than whatever the committee's work is.
Okay,
If to settle an agreement with Camden costs more than the 15,000, then maybe that contingency money you'd want to set some aside for that.
okay.
One thing I would add, just to briefly to this, is that the revenues, and I don't know if your questions were gonna end up there, but this is where I'm, maybe, something that I think that's should be of mind as you talk about this, is that really, when we set the sandbox of revenues that we're working in for wastewater, we really don't try to upset that too much over the course of the year. You set your rate, you set your debt service, and you somewhat step back from the table and let that go. With the on the municipal budget side, there's a lot more variability in terms of what property tax income will do, what excise tax revenue will do. And so it's a little bit more flexible and a little bit more, you have a little bit more to work with. On the wastewater side, you know, if something doesn't hit the right way, and this is why I really wanted to make sure that $65,000 of whatever that 50% represents is in here, because it creates an added stress and burden on the budget that it needn't necessarily be. And there's other ways you can get to the same place without working so hard. What you don't want to do is have to have a rate adjustment mid-year. And that was one thing that the board had talked about in prior years when it was the question of whether or not we had to pay or not pay, and, you know, these negotiations with Camden. The ability to work through that and avoid a mid-year adjustment, I think is very valuable for the board. So if you can, you know, contingency is not something we usually, it's really been, like I said, it's been really something almost singularly focused on this Camden issue over the last few years, which it still would be, but it's, I guess what I'm saying is we don't want to put 25 in if we think it's 35. It's really a cost of 35 or 50. You know, that's sort of, we don't want to overuse that 25,000 and that sort of narrow focus I think you want it to have.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, my question just was fairly simple.
Sure.
The 25,000 doesn't have any, no, there's no claim on that right now.
Not yet.
Okay,
It's still available.
that's good. All right, I'm sorry to, I don't mean
No, go
that
ahead.
anybody else
Go ahead.
wants to jump in
No.
with questions.
No, get through your list.
This is
and-
great.
Yeah.
Page 31, the question I just had there, it just was more like, you know, the purchase and the contractual services line 3,000. It looks like it took a sizable step up in 2024, and now we're kind of holding at that level. We went from 678 to over $1 million, and now we're at $1.1 million. What's driving that?
So if you look at page 32, the first box of information breaks down what goes into that
Right.
purchase and contractual number. So you can see here, there's been a slight decrease in the Woodard and Kern contract, because this year we broke out, it's not just labor that we pay Woodard and Kern, they actually pay all of our utilities and chemicals and stuff for us. So I broke out those costs in here, so that's why there's a slight decrease in that actual number. The majority of that 1.1 million is for treatment. Almost 800,000 of it, 700,000 of it is for treatment. And then you have the Samoset, and the Samoset's a direct offset, so Rockland bills us for the Samoset, we bill the Samoset the exact amount that Rockland bills us, because the Samoset is connected directly into the Rockland plant. And then we have technical support, outside contract labor, electricity, and chemicals are all into that number.
Yeah, and those are all been historically bundled under Woodard and
Correct.
Curran.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay, great.
And so, yeah, so it looks like it's the Camden treatment that's
Really
what
driving
created
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we already know.
Okay. Can we shift to some of the capital expense? How much do we have in the capital reserve fund at this point?
We have, if you look on page 20,
By the way, I should just jump in here, Megan, this is an exceptional budget.
thank you.
The format, everything was, I mean, I got it at the last minute, but I got through it pretty quickly because of the way you've done such a great job of organizing it. So
Thank you.
thank you for that. Sorry, go
That's
ahead.
all right.
Oh, that's a great thing to say.
So on page 20 of the budget document, it outlines our, how we fund our capital projects. So the goal of funding our capital projects is that we invest $250,000 every year in an effort to keep the debt service rate from having astronomical highs and then extreme lows in years that we're not doing large capital projects. So in fiscal year ending 2024, we actually did 3 pump station upgrades this past fiscal year, which meant that we were using a lot more of that capital reserve. So in order to keep our investment at $250,000, we used $288,000 from the capital reserve, leaving us a fiscal year end balance of $314,113.
Got it.
So then we start fiscal year ending 2025. Again, we want to keep it at $250,000. We are in here. We've budgeted $435,000 worth of capital improvements. To keep it at $250,000, we have to use $185,000 of that, which at the end of the fiscal year will leave us $173,000 in that capital reserve. And then you will see that come fiscal year ending 29, we have over $500,000 in that reserve account. But that following year, we have 2 more pump station upgrades that we need to do. So again, the goal of this is to keep our capital investments as steady as we can, and we do that by using this reserve.
And is it that the pump stations just have a given life? So
Correct.
you don't wait
Update
till
the
they fall
electrical
apart?
panels, the
Yeah.
pumps in the pump stations. I mean, when we redid the Camden Street pump station, when the flow meter was replaced, we realized the flow meter was bad and had been bad for a while. So it's important that we stay, our pocket-wise, it's important that we stay up on these upgrades to make sure that our equipment is operating the way that it's meant to operate.
So, thanks for that, Megan. I forgot, I could have probably gotten that answer.
That's okay.
So, you could just point me to that page next time.
Okay.
So, if there were some kind of a sewer expansion, how many years does it usually take, like, practically speaking, to do something like go out to Route 17? Is that like 5 years of time, or is that 2 years of time?
When we did the most recent Route 1 extension, it was almost a year of construction documents and bidding, and then it was a summer for them to do it. And that included 2 pump stations and how many miles of sewer line?
And that wouldn't impact our reserve though, because we'd be doing a whole new bond. for that.
Correct,
Separate line.
correct.
Okay, all right, good. Okay. I think there was, maybe I was confusing the US Route 1 sewer line with a new sewer line.
Yeah, there's two items.
Okay, so there's, none of that is in here, any budgeting for any kind of a
Extension, no.
extension at this
Nope.
point? Okay,
It's just
In the
current
debt.
debt that's in here.
okay. And the reason you brought in the 2016-17 capital improvement numbers was really just to kind of explain where it all started?
Correct.
Okay, great, great. Okay. Oh, and in Camden, the contribution to capital improvements, that's something that is not disputed or, we've been allocating that and paying that?
Correct. So we currently only have one debt payment that we pay them separate, and that was, I think the Rossinav pump station that we're still paying on.
Yep.
And this fiscal year is the last year of that payment. And then all of the debt that we had to Camden that we were paying separately is paid off.
Okay. And then just a couple little things. As much as I like your charts, there's a couple of places where it'd be really helpful for you to just put in there identification of expenses and revenues, because I couldn't make sense of the pillars for some reason.
Sure.
It was like on page, not, on 31 you did it, and then on other ones you don't, and I've started wandering, so
Okay.
if you can help me out with
Yeah.
that, that would be great. And then could you change the spelling on my name?
Yes.
Okay.
That's an
I'm
easy.
gonna be a wastewater commissioner, I just like to have my name spelled right.
Yeah, I actually wondered about home addresses. I didn't see that needed to be in our budget.
They're only in here because it's in the, it's in the general fund budget too.
Yeah, we don't do the home addresses to be public like that, do we?
No, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was the chart on,
Mine even has my phone number.
yeah, the chart on page 27, Megan, if you could just fix that one, that would be great.
yeah.
But like I said, it's an excellent report. I found it well organized and well presented, and yeah, I still have a few questions, but I'll take them offline with you
Okay.
next time we meet.
I thought we might, since Dave is here, maybe just get a brief overview from him of the work that Woodard and Kern does do and what all is involved in that.
Appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak. I think in the future I can put together a presentation to give you a more in-depth overview, but the collection system, as you said before, is up to 24 pump stations,
Oh, 24 now.
or 23, 24 actually. They've been added, I'm not exactly sure. 2 full-time operators. Historically, over time, I've been with Woodard and Kern 30 years. We've been operating the facility up here probably close to 27 years. Andy Field has been the key operator here. A few years back, he was getting a little overburdened with all the work that he was doing. We brought on another person that ended up becoming Randall. So the two of them together run the entire treatment facility. And, day in and day out, they're out in the collection system, doing maintenance, making sure that the pump stations are working properly, doing their daily checks of each pump station. On an annual basis, they take a portion of the lines in town, they jet them and they clean them to keep them working. Inclement weather, they're out there inspecting to make sure we don't have sewer overflows and backups and power outages, which we've had quite a few this year. Most of those pump stations don't have dedicated generators, so they've got to cart generators around from pump station to pump station, making sure everything gets pumped down and making sure there's no sewer line backups. Occasionally, we have had some sewer overflows just because of the nature of wastewater, and in those cases, Andy reports them to the DEP. We submit, as soon as he notifies them, or as soon as he notices that he reports them to the DEP, then we do a follow-up written report. There haven't been too many, knock on wood,
Yeah.
based on the work he's been doing there. Megan mentioned before the capital upgrades, SCADA upgrades to the pump stations, control systems to make sure that they're all running well. maintenance to the manholes, you know, you said over time, there's been a lot of work to reduce I here. The collection system's in good shape. One of the things that Andy and Randall do is they'll make sure they'll inspect areas of the site. And if there's ponding, they work closely with the DPW to make sure drainage basins are cleaned out and drained properly. If you have a storm sewer that backs up, you get flooding in a certain area, that can put a manhole underwater when it shouldn't be. So there's a lot of coordination between the two teams to do a good job there to make sure that you don't have I get into the system, and going through inspecting the manhole rims and the covers and make sure they're seated properly. And, so it's kind of an ongoing task. Obviously, when the inclement weather's here, they're working 24/7 sometimes. And, what it incurring from an administrative standpoint, you know, we invoice one invoice to the town, but we pay for all the utilities. I think 23 different power bills that come in each month. All the vendor
Each pump
supplies-
station is a
each pump
separate
station
account?
is its own separate account, you know. So there's a lot of administrative support that goes into it. We've got a safety team that come up and do inspections and audits on the facilities. They go around each pump station and work with Andy to make sure that they identify any corrections or make sure that they're up to code. Then we get support to, you know, go through that little punch list of items that they find and fix. They also do training. They offer training to the DPW staff. This year we did some confined space entry training for a DPW member, joined that training. So it's just, it's been a good relationship. You know, you're talking about trying to build a cooperative agreement and it may be a municipal utility district up here. I think that should all be looked at. You know, what it certainly supports what's in the best interest of the town. And going forward, we've talked to John about figuring out the best ways to maintain the collection system and operate it going forward. And, you know, our interest obviously is to continue here, but if there comes a transition period, we're certainly welcome to help you with that and assist with that. We've worked with communities where we've recommended new treatment plants, and we've worked with communities where we've recommended they pump to a local facility. We're in the process of doing that with one of my other clients right now. Our suggestion to them was to connect into a neighboring community, get out of the wastewater business for them. That was kind of the right pick, and I think whatever this committee does in working with the town, you know, that's what you'll get out of what it incurring. Treatment and collection system wise, you know, obviously I costs money and more pumping.
Right.
We've got a good program in place for that. We're working on data management for the data reports that go to Megan for flows and.
Does anybody have a sense of what our current I level is?
I haven't looked at a study lately on that.
We had been around 30%, and, you know,
We're nowhere near close.
yeah, no, I'm assuming we're not. I was wondering if is it 10%?
You never will eliminate it,
Yeah,
but I think you're in a good percentage wise
yeah.
for a system this size. And
I know there were a lot of claims around the time of the flow meter issue on Camden Street that Rockport's I issue was, you know, off the charts. But I think between the investigations into homes, the fixing of the flow meter, you know, having that rate increase and people putting their own meters on their own homes, I think we've found generally that much of that I issue was it wasn't as it was made out to be, I suppose. And so we've been able to really, that's one of the nice parts about where Rockport stands, is because we have a fairly modern system, being only 30-ish years old, pretty much what goes in is what we pay for, you know, which is a really nice thing. One thing that we are going to change in the new year is a change on leak adjustments. So, for example, if someone had an issue in their home, stuck toilet or something, and some sort of crazy bill, unfortunately, the issue is that Rockport has to pay that charge regardless to Camden, right, or Rockland. And while there's the human side of you that says, geez, you know, I feel so bad you're in this circumstance, and that ends up being a cost that then all users have to share. Now it's a little different if there's a break on the street or there's a break, you know, that doesn't end up back in the system and treated somewhere else. I think fundamentally we could understand, well, that's not, there may be costs for that, but that's not something that Rockport ratepayers have to turn around and pay for. So that's another change in this new year, that while we certainly don't wish anyone ill in that way, but realistically, it's a cost that would be turned around and passed around to everyone else. That's probably not fair either. If we controlled our own system and we controlled how much I&I and and we were doing our own treatment, different circumstance, I think. Then it's more of a policy matter. But in this case, it's really a question of how the cost gets shared, which is really unfair as it is.
So like around the corner from
Yeah.
my house,
Uh-huh.
that had a pipe break, and for like, what was it, a month or two, or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
the basement was just flooding.
Right. But that was in the basement. It didn't then get back into.
So it didn't go in the
Didn't
sewer.
go into the
Right.
So long as they didn't have a floor drain or something, that it was going into
Right.
the sewer
So-
system.
Would the new way we're doing it adjust so they wouldn't have to pay for the
No, they
sewer bill?
would. They would.
Will have to pay for it, okay.
Okay, that circumstance, I'm talking about a situation where
Like
there's a
toilet.
break and it's going back
Back
into the
into the
system.
system.
If there's a break, the example that Megan gave was, if it's front yard, there was an issue in the yard where the line broke and it went into the
Water
ground.
line, not the sewage line.
Yeah, it would be terrible. You'd obviously feel terribly about that, but realistically, that's not something that's ending up that we're getting a bill for, Rockport.
Oh, because it's not going through the
Correct.
flow
Doesn't go
meter.
back.
Doesn't get
Right.
measured at that meter.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a break in there,
So
yeah.
because I always pictured whatever your water bill was, those number of gallons.
Yeah,
And,
That's typically how.
right. But when it,
oh, but that water broke before it hit their water meter.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
in the sewer meter. Okay.
John?
Dave,
Question?
I just had quick questions. First of all, I have a new appreciation when it rains, when I drive down the street now and I see puddles. So I want you to know that.
You can scrape those leaves off those storm drains.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a rake in my
Or
trunk.
send John a photo.
So, down under, let me see what this chart is. I think it's the capital items, on the to-do list. It's, capital improvement projects estimates. I just noticed you have a, jet and camera, the entire system, Village and Glen Cove,
19.
kind of out there in space, page 19.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Right at the bottom, I just noticed that you're not gonna do any camera or anything for a couple years. Is that normal, or do you feel like we don't have, how often do you need to do that? And is that how you determine I&I problems, or is that
You
just
can
one
do that to
tool?
determine I&I, and then also to look to see, basically if there's cracks, if there's any roots growing through the collection system. But I think Cameron, the system doesn't need to be done every year, but just to try to get I think there's baselines, and then every couple of years to see if there's any deterioration
Yeah.
as it goes.
Okay,
So we have actually had that line in there since 2020, when we did the basement studies. And we actually got through the entire system. So this year and last year and this year, we don't have any sections of the system that need to be cambered. So we'll start it again to make sure that we're staying on top of it.
okay, great, love it.
I want to ask a detailed question. The generators for the pump stations, you said you guys are actually moving generators?
So there's, some of the larger pump stations have dedicated generators with automatic transfer switches. But the smaller pump stations, we have a truck with a portable generator, and it gets hauled around to the different locations. And, depending on how much time is in the wet well and the velocity in some of the pipes, you know how much time you've got before you need to go from one station to the next.
That's what I was trying to
How many,
fathom.
how many stations don't have an automatic generator?
Most of them.
Most of them,
Vast
a lot of them.
I think we've only got, with this budget, I think we'll have 4 that have automatic generators on them.
Out of 23?
Yeah.
So like,
So it's
this
a
is
pretty-
gas-powered generator, and you go and hook it up,
Yep, and they have,
leave
it's-
it there for a while?
For the
or,
pump
then
stations
go
that
to the
lose
next
power.
one?
right, and they have I think they've got 2 generators that they run around to the different pump stations.
Wow.
Can I just
Yeah,
say,
go ahead.
There's a certain amount of storage
Right.
in the piping upstream from the pump.
Yeah,
So the trick is to figure out, all right, how fast is that gonna fill up?
yeah.
All right, and then so you do that, and if you're a guy like Andy who's been doing it for 20 years, he just goes, that's okay for 3 hours, so I'm gonna go over here. But that's what it is, you have volume up from the pump that people are flushing and they're filling, then it's time to go, okay, time to empty it, so that's why they can do that.
Yeah.
So would generators at all the pump stations save us on, I mean, it sounds like it's pretty labor intensive.
It is labor intensive. I think it would be pretty cost prohibitive to have one at every pump
Yeah.
station.
Yep.
They're not
So
cheap.
continue this
Right.
process where we're sort of gradually addressing the larger.
maybe
More
few
would be
more.
better.
Maybe a few more
There's certain,
portables.
Yeah,
right, the pump stations like he was just mentioning before that we know fill up the quickest, get the highest priority for
Yeah.
getting a dedicated generator. I know Andy has a list.
So the one, so in the capital plan for this year, C Street, so if you're familiar where Kim and Elray Kimball live, right there, that we had a washout or culvert just kind of decided to give up on us. But there's a pump right there, and so all that C Street neighborhood is sort of all flows to the lowest spot. And so obviously the density in that neighborhood, right, there's a lot of homes and it all goes in one spot. And so that's an area that Andy during storms and outages.
That's my neighborhood, John, so don't screw that one up.
That's where the
I'm not screwing it up.
asphalt is missing in the
Yeah.
little specs.
That's exactly what it is.
I'm trying, I'm speaking in favor, Bill. But it's a density issue. So right now, the cost we have in here is $135,000, right? So out of a $395,000 budget, a third of it right there is for Bill.
Yeah,
But specifically for Bill.
that's, so
right.
that's the cost of one generator.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
And two, you gotta consider a lot more people have on-demand generators for the house than have ever had before. So even if the power, it used to be the power was out, people weren't flushing their toilets
Flow
because
was
they didn't
down,
have a
right.
way, right?
But now
But now
they
people have
function as
on-demand
normal, right?
generators,
Oh,
so
which is
the
so
flow
great.
is still there whether
Yeah.
the power is on or not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So 100,000 for a generator?
Yeah, 50 kW. Big boy.
Okay,
Install.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
can't just have extension cords.
Yeah, no. My little Honda suitcase
plow.
won't do the job.
Can I make just a general
Yes.
comment, if that's okay?
Please do.
I think that, maybe it's just, doesn't need
Maybe
to
just
be said.
introduce yourself, just
Sorry,
for,
I'm Bill Bowe, I'm a resident, I live in a neighborhood that flushes its toilet all the time, and, you know.
More information than we need.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I
That's
wouldn't
good.
say it was
Thanks,
me, but just general resident, I used to be the chair of the previous task force for siting and selecting the new plant. But in looking all this, and I've spent, as you know, many of you know anyway, a lot of time looking at the Camden system, okay, as well as our system. And I want to emphasize how well this system runs. I'm not advocating for these guys, right, because we don't have a relationship, but they do a wonderful job. We have a system that when you look at the flow, every day and every month, it's flat, all right? Doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, melting, whatever. We're at 67,000 gallons a day going to Camden. And that used to be in the low 70s, and the I&I work that was done 3 or 4 years ago knocked that back down to 67,000. But month after month after month, it sits there, okay? Then you look at the Camden system, and it's the exact opposite, all right? They'll have 2 months a year where their actual flow is roughly what they're being paid to treat. The rest of the year, they're paying for double to even triple the amount of flow because of all their I&I problems. And that's one of Camden's big challenges. But I just want to emphasize how good we have it, all right? And I know there's lots of discussion about it's costing too much of this, too much of that, looking at generators, looking at upgrading pumps, checking lines, cammering things. Yes, it is expensive, but the alternative is a disaster. And that's what they're facing in Camden right now, and we don't want that. So we need to, whatever we agree to,
with Camden, without Camden, whatever, let's keep in mind that the system we have is, perfect's the wrong word, but we don't have to think about it. We don't have sewage flowing into our harbor. We don't have a consent agreement with the government to have to fix those problems. And we've really got a good system going. It's a testament, to what Megan does every year to look after us, what the Woodard Curran folks do, and to Andy and Randall, the technicians that know where all these issues are. So whatever we decide, keep that in mind. It's just my plea, if you will, so I can keep flushing. And yes, I have a generator now, so I can during a storm.
Wait a minute, you can flush your toilet when your power goes out?
I have a portable. Yeah, but you're right. As long as
You can. If you have a well, you can.
pump, you can. But if you're on city water and city sewer,
Right.
you don't need a generator to keep. Anyway,
You're just less active when you have no power.
that's
You know,
right, and you're,
Refrigerator, you're not opening your refrigerator and
Right,
going
not
in
doing
and
dishes.
drinking
Yeah.
and doing dishes.
Laundry.
And laundry, right.
yeah, the water flows down.
Which is where the
Well, thank
majority
you,
of the
Bill.
water
Those are good
comes from.
comments.
Yes, thank you for
showers
those
and-
comments, Bill.
So any other questions for Dave? Anything else you want to add in?
No, just that we appreciate the relationship we've had.
As do we.
It's been a great community. Obviously, Megan and John do a great job, and appreciative of the work they do to help us out. And,
Yeah, and we value that relationship as well.
no, it's helpful, and I learned a lot tonight on your budgeting process. I know it's pretty similar to a lot of the towns, but it's good to hear the concerns and the pinch points you have. And I know our budget has increased a little bit over the last few years with the way inflation went for power bills and everything else, but we're trying to keep it in check.
We appreciate that.
Dave, before you, could you explain the way that the Woodard contract works in terms of, that if it's underspent and how that comes back? Because sometimes it's a misunderstood part of how it works and how, if it's
Yeah,
underspent,
so
where that goes.
one of the
just
things
so they-
that we started doing a long time ago, so this contract it's kind of a lump sum contract, but there's certain provisions of it so that we don't have a windfall. So one of them is on maintenance. So the maintenance budget is set up that anything that we come in under budget on maintenance, 100% of it goes back to the town. Just because we don't want to make a profit off of your infrastructure crumbling. That's why it's in good condition right now, as you said before. The money that we get budgeted, we try and spend every year to make sure it does a good job. The rest of the budget
And is maintenance, is it a labor issue or is that materials? or
Nope, that's
both?
all materials.
Okay, just
Labor
materials.
for the maintenance we do. Labor is, part of the work we do is maintenance as a labor, part of it's operations stuff. But it's
So the
the
material is
budget.
budgeted for
Budgeted, right.
maintenance.
So right now it's $34,400. We spend $30,000, that means, right, $4,400 to come back, 100%. And the rest of the budget is looked at as an aggregate. So we've got the labor budget, we've got utilities, we've got expenses, gasoline for the vehicles that drive around town. And, to the extent that that money doesn't get spent, a portion of it goes back to the town, and a portion of it goes to Woodard and Curran to try and optimize costs.
And-
Likewise, if we exceeded that, we haven't exceeded it fortunately, but if we did, we would eat that cost, which we did for a couple of years. So that payback doesn't come to us, we actually absorb part of that.
And is it, are these costs marked up when they're billed to the town?
So it's all, we have a fee that we charge for doing it, yeah, so in addition to our overhead, we do put a profit on the project.
For the labor
For the
part of
labor,
it, not
right.
like
But
on
not for the
utilities.
utilities,
Right.
not
Right.
for the materials, that's all direct cost.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No?
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you
No,
so
I
much.
appreciate it, thank you.
All right. Guess
Do we make a
we could have a motion, it just says suggested motion. No.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2025 wastewater budget as
I'll make a
presented.
motion to approve the fiscal year 25 wastewater budget as presented.
Second, Michael, Michelle. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Great. All right, thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thanks,
Welcome,
John.
Megan, appreciate it.
And Dave and Bill and Bob for
Everybody,
your participation. Got Team Wastewater here, so.
So,
Boy.
do I now make a motion to exit wastewater? Oh,
Let's hold on for a sec, 'cause we have
Okay.
the letter to Camden.
Oh, okay.
Do we want to do that as
Yeah,
wastewater
yeah, I
commissioners?
think we should, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this letter is, we talked about this at our, I think it was our June meeting even. We had
Yes.
the Article 15 vote, as we know from appointing the task force. And this sort of comes out, there's some issues with Camden that I think is a select board to select board issues that we need to, that we'd like to get on sort of the agenda of the Camden Select Board. So this letter just has 3 issues in it. One is a committee, and this is, again, we discussed these, a committee to work with Rockport. Second is what kind of allowance or allocation do we have from, are we capped at 67,000 gallons per day, or do we have some room to recognize that we are gonna have, new building permits, houses coming onto the system? And then this highlights, sort of a more particular issue, and that is that we have been told by federal officials that there's a $2 million grant that they would have in mind granting to Rockport for the Route 90 extension. But their concern is that something we can make happen? Because giving a grant to a community that is not able to use the grant is not what the grant-making agencies want. They want you using it, wanting the citizens to be appreciative of it. And as this letter recites, we understand that the federal office did reach out to Camden and got a positive reaction about Camden having the capacity and being willing to allocate the capacity for the Route 90 extension. We haven't heard that directly, but the federal official has represented that to us, and in their mind, they feel like we could move forward on this. We obviously would want something more certain from Camden, and I think we're trying to be careful about not revealing any confidences or in this letter, but we also want to have a pretty direct discussion, because this is a big deal for us. If we could do that Route 90 extension, and that $2 million grants don't come along just every day. So that's the second issue, and then the third is resolution of the lawsuit. And that's sort of broken into 2 categories. One is the lawsuit itself, everything's been paid on that, all up to date. Minor issue there, which has been termed as an administrative oversight before, in terms of that law, the famous lost check, that owes about a 6-month
late
gap
fee.
there. Yeah, so there's late fees, and it's not that easy to just say, oh, these are the late fees attributed to that, because of the way Maine Water just keeps a running tally, so we are still incurring late fees, or interest for
because of
that
that.
lost check fee, so it has to go back to Camden, because Camden tells Maine Water what to put on the billing spreadsheet. We don't have a voice in that. So Camden has not corrected the record with Maine Water to show that that payment was actually made in March when they received it and signed for it. So the billing from then on is very
Continues to show in
confused and
arrears.
not right. But, so we just call that out. That's, I think, they're older the more pre-existing select board members are aware of that issue. And then it's independent of the lawsuit, because this was sort of as part of the settlement of the lawsuit, ironically, was this offer by Camden of a 15% discount on their rate to reflect, as we alluded to earlier, Camden historically had not included capital costs in their wastewater rate. And they were told by some federal agencies several years ago that if, in order to receive these grants, they couldn't have the taxpayers paying a portion of the wastewater rate. It had to be all of just the wastewater users. So the capital costs for Camden's system came into the rate, which then is now billed to Rockport. So we now are paying a portion of Camden's capital costs. And this 15% discount was a recognition that those capital costs, some of them have nothing to do with where our water comes into their system, what is used in their system. And so it was sort of this good faith recognition of this. We understand, we haven't heard directly, but Camden has, and it was when we were doing our wastewater budget last year, it was confirmed to us by Camden staff that the appropriate rate for us to build into our wastewater budget was the 15% discount rate. And we relied on that, we created a budget on that, and as John indicated, you know, you don't want to be going back and forth adjusting budgets. So we took them at their word, included the 15% discount, but Camden has continued to post billings with Maine Water without the 15% discount. So there's that discrepancy to be sorted. And then last is just an offer to get together and really talk through some of these things. John?
To that last point, Denise, have we, the rate we are currently building into the budget, I guess this is a little late now, but did we confirm that?
1088.
It's their published, posted wastewater rate.
Yeah, that's what's on their budget, and it's been
So
used.
we got it, we got some communication from them that had that same rate in it?
We did not have a separate, so last year we had a separate communication on this issue. There was an email because obviously it wouldn't have been part of their budget because their billing would have been different. So we didn't pursue that avenue at all. We've used what was part of their budget and that 1088 as the rate that they've used.
And that's the rate that they charge the Camden user?
Camden users.
Their system.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
that's right.
So that's as good as
Individual
any.
user rate, what they charge presumably Midcoast Solid Waste.
But I think the takeaway in all this is, you know, we should probably be confirming the rate that think we're getting charged by them, or do we just wait till the first invoice shows up?
Well, we actually, the only time we've confirmed it was last year, and now we have a dispute.
Well, but
I'm,
I'm just trying to head off disputes in the future. Like, how can we best make double, triple, quadruple, you know, sure that we're using the right rate?
Well, it's the published.
it's the published rate.
Published rate.
And
Okay.
and that's been the
All right, if you guys feel that.
past pattern in practice with Camden and
I
Rockport.
guess it would only be important if there was a chance that they would charge us more than the published rate.
That's what, I think
But-
what John's
but
wanting to make sure doesn't
assuming
happen,
there's
but
no-
we haven't had any indication that
Okay,
they would
all right.
change their past practice
So-
from, but
But we're planning to pay the published rate
we are,
from now on until something else gets worked out.
exactly.
So the 15% is it like 1 year?
1 year,
1
last
year.
fiscal year when we got confirmation from Camden that that was our rate for last year.
Plan on 15% discount, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's just one fiscal year.
one
then.
fiscal year is what's still at issue.
Which is the equivalent of roughly 68,000.
Yeah, this number here.
Okay.
So, any comments or?
No, I think it's a good letter. I know that a couple of you worked on making changes from kind of the original. I think it's to the point. I don't have any additional changes, except I don't know about formatting, if that needs to move over or not.
Yeah, it's
Or if it's
interesting.
a is it a
Exactly, it's like a
sub-bullet
little
of-
sub
okay.
of three, and then the
Okay.
last paragraph is like, okay, back to the
Okay, the
generic,
summary, okay, so all right,
But
then
it-
that's probably good, okay.
which is, yeah,
Denise, can I ask a question?
sure.
I'm wondering about the capacity discussion that's in the letter. I haven't seen the draft, so
Yeah.
it's just complete ignorance. You know, when Megan, you and I worked on the flows, we thought they were around 67,000 gallons a day, right? I don't know what they are currently right now, but is there a risk in the letter of establishing a baseline that we don't want
It
established?
doesn't do that.
Okay, sorry, that's.
No, you don't have to apologize because you don't have it. And you're welcome to look at it, but it really focuses on the notion that, you know, we've had this historic allocated amount from Camden.
Yeah, 150 or
trying-
whatever it
Yeah,
is, yeah.
161 to,
Yeah.
including the high school.
Right.
And we've gotten some various communications, even through, you know, the Article 3 work, that some folks in Camden may believe that's really what our allocated, you know, that's still available to us. And it's been sort of unclear what they,
So my concern is you'd mentioned the 67, and I thought, well,
Yeah, don't cap yourself.
yeah,
No.
right,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, agreed. John?
To that point, we're talking about this Route 90 extension. Is there any way for us to ballpark how much additional capacity that, or how much usage that would create?
We
To
did that.
project that, to give them some, you know, because we're just saying we want to do this, and we're saying it's going to keep us, still keep us under the cap,
Under what we budgeted.
but it might be better to actually give them a.
I wouldn't want to give them one, but we probably want to make, if we can, have confidence that we can do this within the historic allocated
know
amount.
that?
Well, that's what I think Megan's
I'm working on it.
Megan's working her magic.
It's done already.
Yeah, we did the numbers for the budget, and we looked at the revenue and cost. And it depends on the scenarios you're talking about, because we had you have the Route 90 extension area, then you have this question of how many people are gonna sign in or join, right? So we assumed we were gonna cap it at 70% of the people along the route, and that we would gain 10% of that over 10 years. All right, it's just a scenario. Now, you ultimately, and then you have the issue of R&O and Remsen's development. If that were to take place, that was, you know, and I know it's pie in the sky stuff, but that's up to 300 homes. So the number along Route 90 at its max 10 years from now is somewhere around 100,000 gallons a day. Which is a lot of flow.
Which is not within the 161 if we're at 67
It
already.
won't be.
Yeah.
Now, that's assuming that the houses get built and all that business.
Right, and that's a 10-year timeframe.
It is,
Should
10-year
leave room.
timeframe,
By then,
so-
the task force, this is really sort of a short-term,
So the answer short-term is if you build Route 90 and you let that go, you will be underneath the 161. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, but, you know, on a longer-term sort of
We'd need a better-
strategic
yeah.
basis.
Right.
and
that
whether
won't
that's
work.
Camden, whether that's
But
our
I
own
think we
plant.
should be prepared to show that we've crunched the numbers for
Yeah.
our assumption that we're gonna stay under the cap.
Yep, definitely.
I think that would give them,
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, John, for when we sort of delve into this in more detail with them,
Once we get their willingness to start.
to start talking.
yeah, some things that are like 5, 10 years down the road. By then, presumably, if we're going to be working with Camden, we'll have an
We have
agreement
a
that
bigger
addresses
solution.
that. Or we won't.
And we might be talking about our own plant.
But I think it's just, they've got issues now, and I think they're concerned about trying to get their number down to get out from under these
Yep.
citations they've got.
Yeah, which is why we were sort of pleasantly surprised to hear that these,
There was some
there was some,
discussion.
yeah.
But one of the things you have to, I know this maybe is a Captain Obvious statement, but when you have things like hotels opening that we didn't communicate to them on the wastewater side, we just did it. You know, that's totally, I guess, in theory, violating their letter that they sent that said they can't take any more water. But we went ahead and opened the hotel up and no one squawked.
Yeah, and we've had sort of confusing, ambiguous statements about what it means to not increase.
Right.
You know, whether it goes, anyway.
Yeah.
So looking at, and this chart's in 100 cubic feet, so I'd have to convert it, but the Route 90 project was done with 100% of the development completed, it'd be 125,000.
Gallons per day?
100
Or
cubic feet.
125 HCFs.
Right.
Okay. All right, yeah. You gotta do the conversion.
748.
So it's that
748 gallons per hour.
divided.
Yeah, the scenarios are all in there. I mean, I don't know if we need to spend the time doing this now, but they're
As long
all,
as we've crunched the numbers.
we
we've
have.
got it.
They're quite
That's
mapped
good.
out.
Yeah, 93,500.
Yeah.
So 100,000 wasn't really a big lie. I
No,
was
it
guessing.
wasn't, it was great. Pretty solid estimate there.
All right,
So what's the next step with this?
I think, do we need a motion to approve sending this? Is everybody on board in general with sending this letter?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything in here that's, you know, we're not really committing to anything. We're
No, we're just
expressing-
trying to reach out and
expressing
establish
a
some
sentiment
communication. Yeah,
And a wish.
yeah.
So,
Does it convey the olive branch?
Yeah, that's,
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I mean, that's
I mean,
what
I
we
worked
want.
hard on the,
mean,
I mean,
that's-
John had a lot of input on the language to at least, you know, we want to work, we
Well, we
want to work
want to,
together.
and that's right,
Yeah.
and hopefully this will be a good first step in that, and,
Yeah.
I mean, they have new members on their select board, and we have new members on our select board, and hopefully we can work together, so. Should we make a motion, just so that we
Let's
have
just
it
do
as a
it,
point of
and then
record? Okay, so I make a motion that we, send the wastewater letter to the Camden Select Board as presented.
A second?
my first second.
You're in the
Yay, John's
books.
on record.
You're in the books, John.
Jeez, gosh, I feel like I've arrived.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Great, okay. We will get that out.
Now I will make a motion that we exit wastewater and enter back into select board meeting.
Second is Kim. Oops, I actually have a little thing for that.
No, I've already used up my
done.
second. for the-
1 second a meeting.
I don't want to get
all
too
those in
carried
favor?
away.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we're back in regular session. And the next item is select board liaison reports.
I have none to provide, so I'll be quick.
Okay, Kim,
Same here.
John?
I just had, I think I reported last time, we had, the planning.
I know,
board-
this meeting is so
Yeah,
close in time to the
I was
last
thinking
one.
about that, I saw it on the agenda, well, nothing, I
Yeah,
have no
it's
committees.
fine.
Good.
Michael?
I just can't think of one.
Yeah. The only thing I have to report is a big thank you to the Parks Committee, who spent several weekend mornings sanding and repainting the white fence out here.
Very
and
nice.
Really do.
Seen Eric Winter out there with his respirator and all covered and just sanding, so it looks good.
It's really good.
So thanks to them. And that is all we have for,
That all you have?
that's all I've got. So then we could get a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, go Kim. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Give those back to John.
Okay.